Hello and welcome to our podcast and YouTube channel where we bring classic literature for you to enjoy. Today's reading is The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, a beloved novel that has captured the hearts and minds of readers for generations. Using Chat GPT artificial intelligence, my team and I have rewritten the story at a B1 European framework level. That means that you can enjoy the same great story at an intermediate reading level. As you listen to our reading, you'll be transported back in time to 19th century England, where the brilliant detective Sherlock Holmes solves mysteries with his keen intellect and unmatched deductive reasoning. You'll follow along as he solves perplexing cases involving missing persons, stolen treasures, and even murder. This podcast and YouTube channel is for everyone, but is especially perfect for English language learners who want to improve their listening and comprehension skills while enjoying classic literature. Our aim is to provide an enjoyable and educational experience that will help you to expand your vocabulary, improve your grammar, and build your confidence in English. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to email us at willyinbrazil@gmail.com. So sit back, relax, and enjoy our reading of The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. We hope that you will find it both entertaining and enlightening, and that it will inspire you to continue exploring the rich and diverse world of English literature. The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. Adventure 1. A Scandal in Bohemia. Chapter 1. It is clear that Sherlock Holmes held Irene Adler in high regard, even though he did not have any romantic feelings towards her. He saw her as an impressive opponent, someone who had beaten him in a crafty game of wits. She was very smart and resourceful, and he admired her for it. However, Holmes also knew of the dangers of letting emotions cloud his judgment. He understood that his ability to reason and observe was his greatest strength, and he was careful to keep it that way. For him, the pursuit of truth and justice was too important, and any personal feelings or attachments had to take a back seat to that. In a way, his admiration for Irene Adler was a testament to his commitment to his craft. He respected her not just as a person, but also as a challenge that had pushed him to his limits. And even though he had ultimately beaten her, he recognized her as a worthy adversary who had given him a run for his money. I didn't see much of Holmes at that time. My marriage had drifted us away from each other. However, on a dark and stormy night, March 20th, 1888, I found myself passing by Baker Street. Memories of my previous visits to the renowned consulting detective Sherlock Holmes flooded my mind, prompting me to pay him a visit. As I approached his apartment, I saw the light on in his room and caught glimpses of his silhouette pacing back and forth. Knowing his habits well, I could tell that he was deep in thought and engrossed in a new case. Entering, I could see that Holmes was pleased to see me, though he was reserved as usual. With a simple gesture, he offered me a seat and a drink. As he examined me, he remarked that marriage suited me well, and that I had gained some weight since the last time he saw me. He then proceeded to deduce that I had been out in the rain and had a careless servant, which surprised and impressed me. "How do you know?" I asked. "It is really very simple," he said. "I can see that the leather on the inside of your left shoe is marked with 6 cuts that are almost parallel. Someone has carelessly scraped the edges of the sole to remove mud, which caused these marks. That's why I can deduce that you've been outside in bad weather and your shoe has been damaged by a careless worker. And when it comes to your job, if a man walks into my room smelling like medicine, with a black mark on his finger and a bulge on his hat from carrying his stethoscope, I would be foolish not to recognize him as a doctor." I couldn't help but laugh at how easy he made it sound. "Whenever you explain your reasoning," I said, "it seems so simple that I could do it myself, but every time you surprise me with your deduction. I still think my eyes are just as good as yours." "And they are," he responded. "However, you see, but do not observe. The difference is clear." "It's all about training your mind to observe and analyze everything around you," he said. "I've spent my whole life refining these skills, and by constantly watching and practicing, I'm able to make deductions that might seem impossible to other people." He paused for a moment and then continued. But I do not mean to imply that anyone can become a detective simply by watching and practicing. It takes a certain type of mind, a particular way of thinking, to be able to do what I do. It is not for everyone, and that is perfectly fine. I nodded, understanding what he meant. I suppose it is like any other profession, I said. Some people have a natural aptitude for it, while others do not. Exactly, he replied. And like any other profession, it requires constant learning and improvement. I am always studying new fields and refining my methods. That is why I am able to continue to solve cases that others can't. I nodded again, impressed by his deduction and intelligence. Holmes was truly a remarkable man. Since you are interested in these little problems, Holmes stated, and since you are good enough to record one or two of my trivial experiences, you might be interested in this. He threw over a sheet of thick, pink-tinted notepaper which had been lying open upon the table. It was in today's mail, he said. Read it aloud. The note was undated and without either signature or address. Tonight, at 7:45, a gentleman of great urgency will be seeking your counsel. His concerns are extremely serious, and he requires your expertise in the matter. Your past accomplishments in aiding the royal families of Europe have made you a trustworthy confidant in affairs of the utmost importance. This account of you we have received from far and wide, and so we implore you to be present in your chambers at the appointed hour. This account of you we have received from far and wide, and so we implore you to be present in your chambers at the appointed hour. Do not take offense if your visitor chooses to obscure their identity with a mask, as it is merely a precautionary measure. This is indeed a mystery, I remarked after reading the letter. What do you imagine it means? I have no data yet. It is a mistake to theorize before one has data. Unknowingly, one begins to twist facts to suit theories, instead of theories to suit facts. But the note itself, what do you deduce from it? I looked carefully at the writing and paper to gain some insights. The person who wrote this must have been well off, I commented, trying to copy my partner's method. This paper is of a high quality and would cost a lot. It's sturdy and firm. That's odd, said Holmes. This paper was not made in England. Hold it up to the light. I did as he instructed and noticed an interweaved E with a small g and P and a large G with a small t. What do you think it means? Holmes inquired. I suppose it's the name or monogram of the maker. No, it's not. The G with the small t stands for Gesellschaft, which means company in German. It's a common abbreviation like Co. P represents Papier, which means paper in German. Now, let's check our Continental Gazetteer. He took a thick brown book from his shelf. Eglo, Eglinitz, here we go, Egria. It's in a German-speaking country, in Bohemia, not far from Carlsbad. Famous for its many glass factories and paper mills. Ha, my friend, what do you think of that? He smiled as he blew out a cloud of blue smoke from his cigarette. I believe the paper was made in Bohemia, I stated. Exactly. And the author of the note is a German. Notice the odd phrasing of the sentence. This account of you we have from all quarters received. A French or Russian writer wouldn't have said it exactly that way. It is typical of the Germans to be so impolite with their verbs. All that's left to do is to figure out what this German, who writes on Bohemian paper and prefers to hide his face, as he mentions in his letter, wants. And if I'm not mistaken, he's here now to clear up our doubts. As he spoke, we heard the sound of horse hooves and wheels against the curb, followed by the sharp ringing of the doorbell. Holmes whistled. That sounds like a pair of horses, he remarked. Yes, he continued, looking out the window. A lovely little carriage with a pair of stunning horses. They must cost a lot. There's money to be had in this case, Watson, if nothing else. I think I should leave, Holmes. Nonsense, Doctor. Stay put. I can't function without my biographer, he said with a small grin. And this case looks interesting. It would be a shame to miss it. But what about your client? Forget about him. He may need your help, and I might too. Ah, here he comes. Sit down in that armchair, doctor, and pay attention. A heavy and slow footstep was heard approaching the door, followed by a loud and firm knock. Come in, Holmes said. A man entered the room who appeared to be at least 6 feet 6 inches tall and muscular. He was dressed in expensive clothing and a deep blue cloak lined with flame-colored silk. He carried a broad-brimmed hat and wore a black mask that covered most of his face. He had a thick, hanging lip and a long, straight chin that suggested stubbornness. Did you receive my note? He asked in a deep voice with a strong German accent. He looked at both of us, unsure which one to address. Holmes said, Please have a seat. This is my friend and colleague, Dr. Watson, who helps me with my cases. Who do I have the pleasure of addressing? You can call me Count von Kraum, a nobleman from Bohemia, said the man. I've been told that your friend is trustworthy and can be relied upon for a matter of utmost importance. If not, I'd rather speak to you alone. I stood up to leave, but Holmes stopped me and urged me to stay. Nonsense. Both of us or neither, he said. You can say anything to the both of us that you can say to me alone. The Count sighed and said, Then I must start by asking you both to promise to keep what I'm about to tell you a secret for 2 years. After that, it won't matter. But right now, it's so important that it could have an impact on European history. I promise, said Holmes. Me too, I added. I'm sorry for this mask, said the Count. The person who sent me wants me to remain unknown to you, and I must confess that the name I gave you earlier is not my own. I already knew that, said Holmes. This is a delicate matter, continued the Count. We must take every precaution to avoid a scandal that could harm one of Europe's reigning families. To put it plainly, this involves the powerful house of Ormstein, the hereditary kings of Bohemia. I was aware of that, said Holmes, closing his eyes and settling into his chair. The Count looked surprised at the nonchalant posture of the man who had been described to him as the most astute detective and energetic agent in Europe. Holmes opened his eyes and said impatiently to his large client, If you would please explain your situation, Your Majesty, I could offer you better advice. The man leapt out of his chair and walked around the room with uncontrollable agitation. So you know, he said. Then, in a fit of despair, he removed his mask and threw it to the ground. You're right, he exclaimed. I am the king. Why should I try to hide it? Indeed, murmured Holmes. Your Majesty didn't need to speak before I realized I was speaking to Wilhelm Gottsreich Sigismund von Ormstein, Grand Duke of Kassel-Felstein and hereditary king of Bohemia. But you see, said our strange guest, sitting down again and wiping his high forehead, you see, I'm not used to dealing with such matters myself, but the issue is so sensitive that I couldn't entrust it to an agent without giving him power over me. I came incognito from Prague to consult you. Well then, please do consult, said Holmes, closing his eyes again. The facts are these. About 5 years ago, during a long stay in Warsaw, I met a well-known adventuress named Irene Adler. You're surely familiar with the name. Please look her up in my index, Doctor, Holmes murmured without opening his eyes. For many years he had kept track of all the people and things he came across, so it was hard to find a topic or person he couldn't provide information about. In this case, he found her biography sandwiched between that of a Hebrew rabbi and a staff commander who had written a monograph on deep-sea fish. Let me see, said Holmes. Born in New Jersey in 1858. Contralto. La Scala. Prima Donna Imperiale, Opera of Warsaw. Yes. Retired from operatic stage. Ha! Living in London. Quite so. Your Majesty, if I understand correctly, got involved with this woman, wrote her some embarrassing letters, and now wants those letters back. Exactly. But how? Was there a secret marriage? Interrupted Holmes. No. No legal papers or certificates? None. Then I don't understand, Your Majesty. If this woman shows her letters to blackmail or for any other reason, how can she prove they're authentic? There's the handwriting. Nonsense. Forgery. My personal stationery. Stolen. My own seal. Copied. My photograph. Bought. We were both in the photograph. Oh dear, that is very bad. Your Majesty really has made a mistake, Holmes admitted. I was only crown prince then. I was young. I am but 30 now. It must be recovered, Holmes interjected. We have tried and failed. Your Majesty must pay. It must be bought. She will not sell. Steal it, then. 5 attempts have been made. Twice burglars in my pay ransacked her house. Once we diverted her luggage when she traveled. Twice she has been waylaid. There has been no result. No sign of it? Absolutely none. Holmes laughed. It is quite a pretty little problem, said he. But a very serious one to me, returned the king reproachfully. Very indeed. And what does she propose to do with the photograph? To ruin me. But how? I am about to be married. So I have heard. To Clotilde Lothman von Saxe-Meiningen, second daughter of the King of Scandinavia. You may know the strict principles of her family. She is herself the very soul of delicacy. A shadow of a doubt as to my conduct would bring the matter to an end. And Irene Adler? She has threatened to send it, answered the king, and I know she will follow through with her threat. She is a woman of great determination, with the looks of a goddess and the mind of a warrior. She would stop at nothing to prevent me from marrying anyone else. Holmes asked, Are you certain that she hasn't already sent it? I am sure, replied the king. She said she would only send it on the day my engagement was officially announced, which is next Monday. Holmes let out a yawn and said, Fortunately, we have 3 days to work with. I have some other important matters to attend to at present. Will you be staying in London? Of course. You can find me at the Langham Hotel, registered as Count von Krumm. I'll be in touch to update you on our progress, promised Holmes. The king then gave Holmes a blank check for expenses, as well as a chamois leather bag filled with gold and notes totaling £1,000. He also provided Holmes with the address of his former mistress, Bryony Lodge on Serpentine Avenue in St. John's Wood. Before the king left, Holmes asked, Was the photograph a portrait? Yes, it was, replied the king. Holmes said goodbye and told the king he would speak to him again soon. Then he turned to me and requested that we meet the next day at 3 o'clock to discuss the matter further. There you have it. That was Chapter 1 of Adventure 1 of The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. Make sure that you keep your eyes out for the next episode as we'll be continuing the story. And if you have any questions or suggestions of stories that you would like to hear brought to an intermediate level of classical literature that is in the public domain, feel free to email me at willieinbrazil@gmail.com. See you soon in our next episode. And remember, books may get old, but they have a novel way of staying relevant. See you next time.